The silence of deep space was not empty, it was heavy. It pressed against the thick metal skin of the United Earth Coalition starship Artemis like a physical weight. Out here, past the edge of known space, there were no friendly voices on the radio, no supply stations, and no safe harbors. There was only the dark, endless cold and the hum of the engine. Admiral James Cole stood on the bridge of the Artemis, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He was a man carved from stone, with a face that rarely showed emotion and eyes that had seen too much. In front of him, the massive view screen showed nothing but the starry specks of the Orion arm. The crew moved quietly around their stations, efficient and focused, but there was a tension in the air. This was a long patrol, far from home, and the isolation was beginning to wear on them. "Report," James said, his voice low but commanding. "All systems normal, Admiral," a young officer replied. "Long-range sensors are clear. We are holding position." James nodded, though he did not feel reassured. He walked slowly to the main tactical map, a glowing blue table in the center of the bridge. For years, humanity had reached out into the stars, hoping to find friends, allies, or perhaps just someone else who was alive. They had found ruins, they had found dead planets, but they had never found another living soul. It seemed that humanity was alone in the universe. Suddenly, the soft beeping of a sensor cut through the quiet. It was not a loud alarm, but it was persistent. It came from the communications station, where Commander Sarah Park was sitting. Sarah was a sharp officer with quick eyes and a fast mind. She was known for her ability to spot patterns in noise that others missed. She frowned as she looked at her screen. The signal was weak, barely a whisper in the static, but it was there. It was coming from a sector of space that was supposed to be empty. "Admiral," Sarah said, her voice steady but urgent, "I am picking up a transmission. It is very faint." James turned toward her. "Is it a natural phenomenon? A star?" "No, sir," Sarah answered quickly. Her fingers flew across her keyboard as she tried to clean up the signal. "It is artificial. It is a structured broadcast. It is repeating the same message over and over." The bridge crew stopped what they were doing. Everyone looked at Sarah. In all their years of exploring, they had never received a message like this. It was the moment they had trained for, but also the moment they feared. "Can we translate it?" James asked, walking over to stand behind her chair. Sarah adjusted the frequency filters. The static on the screen began to organize itself into data blocks. The ship's computer began to work, matching the alien syntax against the mathematical languages Earth had prepared for first contact. "I am attempting to decode the universal language protocols," Sarah said. She held her breath. "It is old, sir, very old. The code structure is primitive, but the underlying math is consistent." A few seconds later, a voice came over the speakers. It was not a human voice, but a synthesized translation, flat and toneless, yet the despair in the words was clear. "Attention, Galaxy. This is the High Council of the Silver Accord. We are broadcasting to all remaining channels." James felt a chill run down his spine. The Silver Accord, historical records from the ruins they had found, mentioned this name. It was a great alliance of civilizations that had existed thousands of years ago. They were the legends, the ancients who had supposedly vanished. "We are the last," the voice continued, broken by digital distortion. "Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are burning. The enemy, the Void Swarm, they are unstoppable. They do not talk. They do not negotiate. They only consume." The bridge was deadly silent. No one moved. The voice spoke of a war that ended before humanity even learned to use fire. "We held the line at the rim for 10,000 years, the message went on. "But we have failed. Our defenses have fallen. There is no one left to send this. I am sending this automated beacon into the dark, hoping that someone, anyone, is listening. If you hear this,
Run, hide, do not let them find you. We thought we were the guardians of peace. We were wrong. There is only the dark now. This is the Silver Accord, signing off." The message ended. The transmission cut out, leaving only the soft hum of the ship. James stared at the screen. His heart was beating fast, but his face remained hard. He looked around the room at his crew. They were young, they were human, and they were afraid. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Admiral, the signal source is coming from a massive debris field just 3 light-years away. If the Silver Accord was real, and they are gone, then we are not alone," James finished for her, "and whatever killed them might still be out there." He walked back to the center of the bridge. He looked at the tactical map. The empty spots on the map no longer looked empty. They looked like hiding places. "Captain Michael Kim," James called out. The captain of the ship, a strong man named Michael Kim, stepped forward. "Yes, sir. Sound general quarters. Wake the rest of the fleet. Bring the main guns online." Michael hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Do you think the enemy is still there, sir?" James looked at the spot on the map where the message had come from. He thought about the warning. Run, hide. That is what the ancients had done. They were peaceful people, maybe too peaceful. They tried to run from a predator, but humanity was different. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting. They had fought nature, they had fought each other, and they had survived. "No, Captain," James said, his voice like iron. "I don't think they're gone. I think they are waiting for the next victim." He turned to the crew. He saw the fear, but he also saw the strength.
"They thought they had no one left," James said, thinking aloud. "They sent a cry for help into the void, thinking it would never be answered. They were wrong. We are here." He slammed his hand onto the console, a sharp sound that made everyone jump. "Set a course for that debris field," James commanded. "We're going to find out what killed the Silver Accord." "And then what?" Sarah asked quietly from her station. James looked at her. A small, dangerous smile touched his lips. "Then we're going to introduce them to humanity," he said. The lights on the bridge shifted from a soft blue to a combat red. Klaxons began to wail softly throughout the ship. The Artemis turned, its massive engines flaring with blue fire. Around them, the rest of the United Earth Coalition, hundreds of ships began to form up. They were a young species, new to the stars, but they were not afraid of the dark. They were the fleet that answered when the ghosts called, and they were coming for a fight. The United Earth Coalition fleet moved through the darkness like a pack of silent wolves. At the front was the Artemis, followed closely by the heavy destroyer, the Icarus. On the bridge of the Icarus, Captain Michael Kim stood with his feet apart, watching the view screen. He was a man of action, calm under pressure, and right now his instincts were screaming at him. Ahead of them lay the coordinates of the Silver Accord's last signal. As the ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the true scale of the disaster was revealed. Michael's breath caught in his throat. It was not just a battlefield, it was a graveyard. Stretching out for millions of miles was a field of wreckage. Massive alien ships, some larger than anything humanity had ever built, floated broken and lifeless. Their hulls were twisted, their metal burned. There were no escape pods, no survivors drifting in the void. It was a tomb. The Silver Accord had been erased from existence. "God help us," Lieutenant Jessica Lee whispered from her station at the tactical console. Jessica was young but talented, and she was usually the first to spot a threat. Right now, she was just looking at the destruction in horror. "Sir, these readings, some of these ships are made of materials we have never seen. They were so advanced." Michael nodded grimly. "Advanced, but dead. Lieutenant, keep sensors active. Whatever did this might still be nearby." "Aye, Captain," she replied, her voice trembling slightly as she returned to her work. Suddenly, a red light flashed on the main console. "Contact!" Jessica shouted, her training kicking in.
It's coming from behind that large dreadnought wreckage, bearing 015. It's small, but the engine signature is active." Michael narrowed his eyes. "Hail them. Let's see who survived the apocalypse." A few tense moments passed. The view screen flickered and then showed the image of the alien ship. It was a small transport vessel, scarred and battered. Half of its hull was melted away, exposing its insides to space. It looked like it was holding on by a thread. Then a face appeared on the screen. The being was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished silver. Its eyes were large and dark, filled with a deep, overwhelming sadness. This was Kale, a commander of the Silver Accord. "Do not shoot," Kale said, his voice translated by the computer. It sounded tired, defeated. "We have nothing left. Please let us drift into the dark." Michael stepped forward to the communication pickup. "I am Captain Michael Kim of the United Earth Coalition. We are not here to shoot you. We received your beacon." Kale looked confused. He stared at Michael, then at the background of the human bridge. "Coalition? I do not know this name. You are not of the Void Swarm." "No," Michael said firmly. "We are humans. We came from a planet called Earth." "Earth," Kale whispered. "A new race? But how did you get here? The swarm blocks all travel." "We heard your cry for help. Commander, can you dock with us? Your ship is about to break apart." Kale hesitated. He seemed afraid to trust anyone, but looking at the damage to his ship, he knew he had no choice. Yes, we will dock, but be warned, the swarm follows us. It is never far behind." 20 minutes later, Kale was on the bridge of the Icarus. He stood awkwardly in the center of the room, looking around with wide eyes. He was surrounded by human technology, which was bulky and mechanical compared to the sleek, seamless tech of his own people. To him, the human ship looked primitive, almost ancient. Jessica Lee was at her console, trying to make Kale comfortable. She offered him water, which he looked strangely at before drinking. "You are a young species," Kale said, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. He looked at the weapons consoles, the manual switches, the rough metal of the floor. "We do what we can with what we have," Michael crossed his arms. "It is not an insult, it is an observation. The Silver Accord existed for 20,000 years. We traveled the stars easily. We had energy shields that could block a supernova. We had weapons that could stun an entire planet. We thought we were the masters of the galaxy." He paused, his eyes dropping to the floor. "But then the swarm came. They did not care about our shields. They did not fear our stun weapons. They just kept coming. We tried to talk to them. We tried to offer peace. We do not know how to fight. We forgot how to fight." Michael looked at Jessica. The humans couldn't believe it. An alliance that lasted thousands of years had forgotten how to fight a war? "You said you used stun weapons?" Jessica asked, her brow furrowed. "You tried to capture them?" "Of course," Kale said, as if it was the only logical way. "To kill is barbaric. We preserve life. We tried to contain the swarm, to rehabilitate them, but they cannot be rehabilitated. They only consume." Michael walked over to the tactical map. He looked at the data from the Silver Accord ships that Kale had shared. The logs showed that the aliens always used the same tactics: hold position, raise shields, and fire warning shots or non-lethal pulses. They acted like police officers trying to arrest a wild animal, not soldiers fighting a war.
"Commander Kale," Michael said, his voice serious, "you tried to play by rules against an enemy that has no rules." Kale looked up. "What do you mean?" Jessica stepped in, her fingers flying across her keyboard. She brought up a schematic of the human railguns. "Captain, look at this. The swarm ships have bioorganic armor. It regenerates if hit by energy beams, but high-velocity kinetic impacts, that should tear them apart." She looked at Kale. "We don't use stun weapons, Commander. We use railguns. We fire chunks of metal at speeds that make them go right through a ship like paper.
We use missiles with warheads designed to explode and shatter everything nearby." Kale looked at her in shock. You mean to kill? Just destroy them?" "Yes," Michael said simply. "If you break a wolf's leg, it will bite you. If you destroy the wolf, you can walk home." The alien commander seemed stunned by this concept. He had spent his entire life in a society that valued peace above all else. The idea of total war, of using weapons designed solely to destroy, was alien and frightening to him. "But your ships," Kale argued, pointing at the ceiling. "You have no shields. If the swarm fires at you, you will die instantly. We lost dreadnoughts with shields 10 times stronger than your hull plating." "That's true," Michael admitted. "Our ships are fragile, but we are fast and we are unpredictable." He turned to Jessica. "Lieutenant, prepare the main battery. Target that debris field over there. I want to show Kale what we can do." "Aye, Captain," Jessica said with a grin. She loved the guns. On the view screen, the view shifted to a large piece of a destroyed alien station. "Firing main railgun," Jessica announced. The Icarus shook slightly as a massive magnetic coil accelerated a tungsten slug to a fraction of the speed of light. There was no bright beam, no laser light, just a thunderous recoil. On the screen, the distant piece of debris simply shattered into dust. It was a violent, brutal display of power. Kale flinched. He turned pale, or the alien equivalent of pale. "So much violence," he murmured. Michael looked at the alien. He felt a pang of sympathy, but he also knew that sympathy wouldn't save them. "Kale," Michael said softly, "the swarm is coming for my fleet. We don't plan to run. We plan to stop them, but we need to know everything about them, their speed, their tactics, their weak points." Kale looked at the human captain. He saw a determination that the Silver Accord had lost long ago. These humans were primitive, yes, they were violent, but they had a fire that Kale's people had extinguished long ago. "I will help you," Kale said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength, "but I fear that even your brutal weapons may not be enough. The swarm is a black tide." "We'll see about that," Michael said. "We have been fighting wars on our own planet for 10,000 years. We are very good at it." Just then, the communication console beeped. Admiral James Cole's voice came through. "Captain Kim, report to the Artemis immediately. We have a plan. The swarm is closer than we thought." Michael looked at Kale. "Come with me, Commander. You're about to see how humans make a plan." As Kale followed Michael off the bridge, he looked back at the tactical screen. He saw the human fleet forming up, moving with a precision that hinted at a long history of warfare. For the first time in a decade, Kale felt a tiny spark of hope. It was a terrifying hope, built on guns and aggression, but it was better than the silence of the grave. The war room on the Artemis was a dimly lit circle of cold metal. In the center of the room, a large holographic table displayed the star charts of the sector. Red dots blinked ominously, representing the estimated locations of the enemy. Around the table stood the most important minds in the fleet. Admiral James Cole sat at the head, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the map. To his right stood Captain Michael Kim and the alien commander Kale. To his left was Officer David Choi, a brilliant young analyst who could see patterns in chaos that others missed. The air in the room smelled of stale coffee and ozone. Kale looked at the map with trembling hands. He pointed a long, slender finger at a cluster of red dots moving steadily toward the fleet's position. "The Void Swarm," Kale said, his voice heavy with dread. "They do not stop. They do not sleep. They sense energy, life, and matter. They consume it all and move on. My people, the Silver Accord, we tried to reason with them for 100 years. We offered them empty worlds to live on. They destroyed the worlds and us." David Choi adjusted his glasses, typing rapidly on a tablet. He brought up the data logs Kale had provided from the Silver Accord ships. The data was terrifying. The swarm used numbers that the human mind could barely process, millions of ships acting like a single hive mind. "Kale," David said, looking up from his tablet, "according to these logs, the Silver Accord had technology that could move stars. You had shields that could block solar flares. How did you lose so quickly?" Kale lowered his head in shame. "I believe we were too peaceful. The lesson is this: the enemy has no weaknesses. They cannot be stopped. The only way to survive is to run. Hide yourself, bury your heads in the sand, and pray that they pass you by. That is the only way a young species like yours survives." Admiral Cole leaned forward. He listened carefully. He was a soldier, born and raised in a time when Earth was tearing itself apart. He understood violence. He understood that sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become a bigger monster. "And now they are coming here?" Cole said. It was not a question. "Yes," Cale whispered. "You must run. You have faster ships than the Accord did, but your engines are noisy. They will find you. Go back to your home world, bury your heads in the sand, and pray that they pass you by. That is the only way a young species like yours survives."
The room went silent. Michael Kim looked at the Admiral, waiting for his reaction. He knew the old man well enough to know what he was thinking. Running was not in James Cole's vocabulary. Cole stood up slowly. He walked around the table until he was standing right in front of Kyle. The alien looked small compared to the broad-shouldered human admiral. "Kyle," Cole said, his voice rough but calm, "I appreciate your advice, but you don't know us. You don't know humanity." "I have studied your history since I came aboard," Kyle argued. "You are a divided people. You have fought many wars. You are violent. That is why you should run. The swarm eats violence." "No," Cole said, shaking his head. "We don't run because we know we can win." Kyle laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Win? The Silver Accord had 10,000 years of peace and power. We fell in a decade. You have been in space for 200 years. How can you possibly win?" David Choi stepped in. He turned the holographic map. The red dots of the swarm were moving in a straight line, searching for the energy signature of the fleet. "Because the Silver Accord fought like a police force," David said. "You had rules. You didn't fire on disabled ships. You didn't use weapons that caused too much damage to the environment. You treated this like a game with rules." "There are no rules in survival," Michael added, crossing his arms. "Humanity has spent our entire history fighting against enemies who wanted to wipe us out. We don't fight to contain, we fight to erase the threat." Cole put his hands on the table, looking at the tactical display. "Mr. Choi, what if we don't hide? What if we do the opposite? What if we ring the dinner bell?" David's eyes lit up. He understood immediately. He started typing commands into the simulation. "The swarm tracks energy. They are looking for a rich world to eat. We could send a fake signal, a massive one. We make it look like there is a planet full of resources and life right in the middle of the Iron Nebula." "The Iron Nebula?" Kyle asked. "That is a dense cloud of gas and dust. Sensors do not work well there." "Exactly," Michael said with a grin. "We will see them, but they won't see us until it is too late." "But you cannot defeat them with ships," Kyle shouted, becoming desperate. "They have numbers you cannot count. Even if you ambush them, they will overwhelm you with bodies. They will crash into your ships just to destroy you." Cole looked at Kyle. His eyes were cold, hard steel. "Then we will use the one thing your people forgot how to use: ruthlessness." Cole turned to David. "Show him the simulation." David pressed a button. The hologram changed.
It showed a fleet of human ships engaging the swarm, but the humans did not form a defensive line. They scattered. They moved unpredictably. They launched missiles that carried no guidance systems, old technology that the swarm could not hack electronically. They used nuclear weapons not as a last resort, but as a standard opening move. Kyle watched the simulation in horror. He saw human ships sacrificing themselves to create openings. He saw them using the debris of their own enemies as weapons. He saw them doing things that went against every tactical doctrine the Silver Accord had ever written. This is madness, Kyle stammered. You are throwing your lives away. We are trading lives, Cole corrected him, but we will trade them at a rate the swarm cannot afford. We are not afraid to die, Kyle. We are only afraid of losing. Cole walked back to the head of the table. The energy in the room had changed. The humans were no longer listening to the alien as a teacher. They were listening to him as a warning, but they were planning their own path. Here is the plan, Cole announced, his voice booming off the walls. We will send the bait signal to the Iron Nebula. We will position the fleet inside the gas clouds. We will turn off our active sensors and run passive only. We will wait until the swarm is deep inside the trap. He looked at Michael. Captain Kim, you will lead the vanguard. Your job is not to destroy the enemy. It is to make them angry, make them chase you, draw them into the killing zone. Michael nodded. It will be done, sir. Cole looked at David. Officer Choi, prepare the nuclear mines. I want the nebula seeded with enough explosives to turn that gas cloud into a star for a few seconds. Aye, Admiral, David said, his fingers flying across the screen. Finally, Cole looked at Kyle. The alien looked sick. He was seeing a species that was eager to go to hell and back just to spit in the devil's eye. You are welcome to stay on our ship, Kyle. You will be safe here, but do not ask us to run. We are humans. We do not abandon our home, and we do not let monsters dictate our future. Kyle looked at the Admiral. For the first time, he saw past the primitive clothes and the bulky technology. He saw a spirit that the Silver Accord had lost eons ago. The spirit of the predator. A species that had clawed its way up from the mud and was ready to claw its way into the stars, regardless of the cost. You will all die, Kyle whispered, but there was less certainty in his voice now. Maybe, Cole said, sitting back down, but we will take the swarm with us, and that's more than your people ever did. The room went silent for a moment. Then the Admiral stood up. Dismissed, Cole said. Prepare the fleet. We move out in 1 hour. The officers saluted and filed out of the room. Michael Kim stayed for a second, giving Kyle a reassuring pat on the shoulder before leaving. David Choi packed up his tablet, pausing to look at the map one last time. The red dots were closing in. It was a suicide mission. It was crazy. It was exactly the kind of thing humanity was famous for. I am crazy, David muttered to himself with a small smile. God help the galaxy. He turned off the lights and left the room, leaving the hologram spinning in the dark. The trap was set. The wolves were ready. The Iron Nebula was a dark and thick cloud of purple and gray gas. It blocked the light of the stars, making it a perfect place to hide. The United Earth Coalition fleet sat silently inside the fog, their engines powered down to the lowest possible setting. They were like sharks waiting in the deep water.
On the bridge of the Artemis, the lights were dim. Admiral James Cole stood in front of the main view screen, though it showed nothing but swirling mist. The silence was heavy. Everyone was holding their breath. They knew that in the next few minutes, the fate of humanity would be decided. The bait is active, Commander Sarah Park reported softly.
Her station glowed with a soft green light. "We are transmitting the fake planetary signal. It looks like a lush, resource-rich world ripe for the taking." Sarah's fingers moved swiftly over her console. She was anxious. They had never fought an enemy like this before. She checked the communication channels. They were jammed with static. "I am sending the signal now, sir," Lieutenant Daniel Park said from his station. Daniel was Sarah's younger brother, a hotshot pilot with a love for speed. "We are flooding the zone." Suddenly, the sound on the bridge changed. The quiet hum of the ship was drowned out by a wave of noise. It wasn't a sound from the ship's speakers. It was coming from the enemy. Millions of voices, screeching and clicking, flooded the local communication network. It was a sound designed to cause fear. "The swarm is here," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "Massive energy signature detected. They are dropping out of light speed." On the tactical screen, the red dots appeared. First hundreds, then thousands. The view screen cleared slightly as the enemy ships approached. They were not beautiful and sleek like the Silver Accord ships. They were ugly, jagged things made of bone and black metal. They looked like insects grown to the size of mountains. There were so many of them that they blocked out the stars. Cale, who was standing near the back of the bridge, covered his ears. "The hive mind. They are screaming. They sense the trap." "They fell for it." Michael Kim's voice came over the comms channel. He was on the Icarus, waiting at the very edge of the nebula. "Admiral, they are heading right for the center of the trap. They are hungry." Admiral Cole watched the map. The red mass of the swarm was moving toward the fake signal, deep into the nebula where the human fleet was hiding. They were arrogant. They did not think that primitive ships could hurt them. "Hold position," Cole ordered. "Wait for my command." The swarm ships reached the center of the nebula. They began to swarm over the fake signal source, confused that there was no planet there. Suddenly, they realized something was wrong. The Icarus moved. "Engage," Cole said. The human fleet roared to life. From every ship, massive railguns fired. Since the human ships were hiding in the gas, they had the element of surprise. Tungsten slugs, traveling at incredible speeds, tore through the thin armor of the bioships. The effect was devastating. The first line of swarm ships didn't explode, they simply shattered. The kinetic energy ripped them apart. But there were too many of them. The swarm reacted instantly. They turned their anger toward the human ships. "Fighters, launch!" Daniel shouted into his radio. Daniel Park's squadron, the Black Ravens, launched from the hangar bays. They were small, agile ships built for atmosphere, but they were deadly in space. Daniel gripped his controls tightly. "Stay close and watch out for their acid spitters," Daniel yelled to his squadron. "We have one job. Light 'em up." The human pilots did not fly in formation like the aliens expected. They flew like angry hornets. They swooped and dove, using the thick gas of the nebula to hide. On the bridge of the Artemis, Sarah watched her brother's radar signature. He was moving fast, risking a collision to get behind a massive alien cruiser. "Daniel, be careful," she whispered to herself. Daniel saw his target. It was a huge ship that looked like a brain exposed to space. It was controlling the smaller drones around it. He flipped a switch on his console. Under his wings, he carried a special payload. It wasn't a laser, it was a canister of napalm gel, a primitive chemical weapon from Earth's old wars. "Eat this!" Daniel yelled. He fired the canister. It stuck to the side of the alien brain ship. He banked his fighter hard to the left and hit the detonator. A massive fireball erupted in space. The chemical burned hot and stuck to everything. The alien ship shrieked, a sound that could be heard even through the vacuum vibrations. The fire ate through the organic hull. The ship began to spin out of control, crashing into other swarm ships. All across the nebula, similar scenes were playing out. The Silver Accord had used energy beams that could be reflected. The humans used solid slugs and explosives. The swarm's biominds tried to predict the humans, but the humans were too chaotic. They made mistakes, took risks, and did the unexpected. However, the swarm was vast. They began to overwhelm the human vanguard. Hundreds of small alien drones slammed into the Icarus, exploding against its hull. The ship shook violently. "Shields are failing. We have hull breaches on decks 4 and 5, the crew of the Icarus screamed. "We are not retreating," Captain Michael Kim shouted over the noise of the alarms. "Keep firing. If they want to bite, we will shove our fist down their throat." Back on the Artemis, Admiral Cole saw the Icarus taking damage. His jaw tightened. He knew the plan was working, but the cost was high. "Sarah," Cole said calmly, "initiate Operation Scramble. Give them something to think about." Sarah nodded. She typed a command into her console. She didn't send a virus. She didn't hack their computers. Instead, she used the ship's powerful communication array to broadcast a specific frequency on every channel. Suddenly, the screaming of the swarm was drowned out. It was replaced by music. It was heavy, loud, aggressive electric guitar, played at maximum volume. It was a style of music called heavy metal, known for its anger and noise. The swarm was a hive mind. They communicated through telepathy and sound. The loud, chaotic noise of the human music disrupted their thoughts. It was like 1,000 people shouting in your ear at once.
The swarm ships hesitated. Their formation broke. They were confused by the sonic attack. "They don't know what hit them," Sarah said, a small smile on her face. "Now," Cole ordered, "fire the nuclear mines." From the depths of the nebula, hidden behind asteroids, massive explosives detonated. They were not precision bombs. They were raw, destructive power. The explosions lit up the nebula like new stars. The shock waves tore through the confused swarm fleet. The combination of the sonic disruption, the nuclear blasts, and the constant railgun fire was too much. The center of the swarm formation vaporized. Cale watched the view screen in awe. He saw fire, destruction, and chaos. He saw the enemy running. For thousands of years, the Silver Accord had run from the swarm. Today, he watched the swarm run from humanity. Lieutenant Daniel Park flew through the debris, his fighter smoking. He had used all his missiles. He had only his guns left. But as he looked around, he saw the enemy breaking. "Did you see that?" Daniel laughed over the radio. "They are running. They're actually running." "Don't get cocky, kid," Michael Kim's voice came over the radio, sounding exhausted but triumphant. "Form up and prepare for a second wave. But I think you're right. They didn't expect the wolves." The battle was not over, but the tide had turned. The humans had stood their ground in the dark. They had used their primitive weapons and their angry spirit to bloody the nose of the greatest monster in the galaxy. The void swarm was retreating, heading back into the dark, fearful of the noise and the fire. On the Artemis, Admiral Cole finally sat back in his chair. He let out a long breath he didn't know he was holding. The ship shook from a near miss, but he didn't flinch. "We made our point," Cole said softly. "We are here, and we are not leaving." The silence returned to the Iron Nebula, but it was different now. The screaming of the void swarm was gone, replaced by the crackling of dying fires and the groaning of twisted metal. Dust floated in the air like snow. The battle was over. The United Earth Coalition fleet had survived. On the bridge of the Artemis, the red alert lights finally turned off, returning to a soft, calming blue. Admiral James Cole slumped slightly in his chair. He was tired. His uniform felt heavy, and his muscles ached from hours of tension. He looked at the view screen. The vast, ugly shapes of the swarm ships were gone. Only wreckage remained. The enemy had retreated back into the deep dark, running from the fury of the human guns. "Report," Cole said, his voice raspy. Commander Sarah Park stood up from her console. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright. Damage reports are coming in, sir. We lost 40 ships. The Icarus took heavy hits to her engines, but she is still flying. Casualties are high, but we are alive." Cole nodded slowly. 40 ships. It was a high price to pay. He thought of the families on Earth who would receive the bad news. He felt a weight in his chest. But then he looked at the tactical map. The red dots were gone. The enemy was running. The price was high, but the cost of losing would have been extinction. "And the enemy?" asked Cole. "Retreating," Captain Michael Kim's voice came over the speakers. His ship, the Icarus, was drifting nearby. "They're running fast, Admiral. I don't think they will come back anytime soon. They are afraid." "Good," Cole said. "Let them be afraid." The door to the bridge opened, and Cale walked in. The alien commander moved slowly. He looked around the bridge with new eyes. He saw the repairs being made, the sparks from welding tools, and the tired faces of the crew. Cale had seen many things in his long life. He had seen the beauty of the Silver Accord at its peak. He had seen the terror of the swarm destroying everything. But he had never seen anything like this. Cale walked up to Admiral Cole. The two leaders stood there looking at each other. One was an ancient being of silver skin, representing thousands of years of failed peace. The other was a human, scarred and rough, representing a young, violent species that refused to die. "I did not believe it was possible," Cale said softly. "My people, we were the guardians. We thought we were the best. We thought because we were advanced, we were strong. We were wrong." Cole stood up to face him. "You had better tools, Cale, but you didn't have the will to use them." "You are dangerous," Cale said. There was no judgment in his voice, only a statement of fact. "You are brutal. You use weapons that we banned long ago. You fight like animals." "We fight like humans," Cole replied firmly. "We fight because if we don't, everything we love dies. We are not looking for a perfect universe. We are looking for a safe home." Cale looked down at the floor. "I watched your pilots. I watched your captains. You do not act like a hive mind. You argue, you make mistakes, but you adapt. The swarm could not predict you because you do not follow logic. You follow hope and anger." Cale looked up, meeting Cole's gaze. "For 10,000 years, the galaxy lived in fear of the dark. We hid behind our walls and waited for the end. Today, you broke the cycle. You fought the darkness and burned it." The Admiral looked around at his bridge crew. He saw Sarah smiling at her brother's fighter returning to the hangar. He saw the medics treating the wounded. He saw the determination in their eyes. They were not monsters. They were just people who refused to give up.
"We are not the guardians you were, Cale," Cole said. "We can't give the galaxy peace. We aren't diplomats. We are soldiers." "That," Cale said, "is exactly what the galaxy needs. The Silver Accord brought order, but order is fragile. You bring strength, a terrifying strength." Cale extended his hand. It was a human gesture he had learned. "The galaxy is a safer place today, James Cole, not because the swarm is gone, but because they know you are here." Cole shook the alien's hand. It was cool and smooth. "We are here to stay." Hours later, the fleet was gathered. The repairs had begun, but the crew needed to hear from their leader. Admiral Cole stood on the deck of the Artemis, looking out at the rows of ships floating in the nebula. His voice was broadcast to every screen in the fleet. "Today, we lost friends. We lost good people. We will mourn them. But we did not lose our future. The Silver Accord thought humanity was too young, too violent, too primitive to help. They thought the universe was beyond saving." He paused, looking at the stars. "They were wrong about the universe. It is not dead. It is just waiting for someone to stand up and fight for it. The galaxy thought it had no one left, so they called for help, and we answered. A cheer went up over the comms. It was a loud, raw cheer from thousands of throats. It was the sound of humanity realizing they were not alone and that they were strong. The Artemis turned its massive bow toward the open space. The engines glowed blue-bright. The fleet began to move, leaving the wreckage of the battle behind them. They were not returning to Earth yet. There were other survivors out there. There were other planets that needed help. The galaxy was vast, and it was full of danger. But now the monsters in the dark had something to fear. Sarah Park stood at the back of the bridge, watching the stars streak by. She thought about her brother Daniel, flying his patrol. She thought about Kale, the ancient alien who looked at them with wonder. She felt a surge of pride in her chest. They were not just explorers anymore. They were the protectors. Captain Michael Kim sat in his chair on the Icarus, watching the Artemis lead the way. He took a sip of cold coffee and smiled. It was a simple smile, but it was full of confidence. "Well," Michael said to his pilot, "let's go see what else is out there." The fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel, stretching the stars into long lines of light. The beacon had been answered. The silence of the galaxy was broken. Humanity had arrived, and they were ready for whatever came next.